pleasure to be back here. I used to live in South Africa for about a year and a half in 2002, which was after I first came to Africa in 1988 as a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya, teaching in a remote school without electricity, running water, or even books. Somehow that infected me with a passion towards solving some of the world's biggest challenges, and I never left Africa. I've been part of Africa for the last 30 years. As I mentioned, I lived in South Africa for about a year and a half in 2002 when I was working on the regional drought. Some of you might remember there was a big regional drought, and I was here and I was analyzing the severity of food insecurity at that time, shining a light on the problems. Well, I'm delighted to be with you here today to shine a light on the opportunities and the solutions for solving the world's biggest challenges. We call these the Global Grand Challenges at Singularity University. These are very much akin to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that you're probably aware of. We divide them up into 12 Global Grand Challenge areas, and our perspective is that each and every single one of these is solvable. Whether it be energy, environment, food, water, governance, security, etc. These are all solvable, and they're solvable because of not just the innovative capacity of people, but the driver of exponential technologies. So what I'd like to do with you now is to review some of the progress that we're making in these areas and some of the opportunities. Peter Diamandis keeps a running tab on evidence for abundance, all the progress we've been making so far. And you can go on his website and you can see one of many graphs like this. This is children who die before the age of 5, and it shows the tremendous progress we've been making already. And yet now we're living in an era of exponential technology, not least of which connecting the world to the internet. What we have here is Facebook's version of this, the drone, and Google's version, the loon, Google Loon. Google Loon first got piloted in New Zealand, then was in Peru, and now is on the African continent in Kenya. They're actually launching the Google Loon in Kenya. They're going to give internet access in the next few years to billions of people. This is like turning on the light switch for the billions of people who do not have access to internet all of a sudden. Well, that means billions more minds, creative minds, innovative minds, passionate people to solve the world's biggest challenges. And thanks to companies like this in South Africa, the hardware is becoming cheaper and cheaper as well. This was should have been just launched recently. I'm sure many of you know about it. A $30 smartphone designed specifically for the market in Africa. They made a deal with Google's Android platform that the phones weren't preloaded with a bunch of excessive apps and whatnot that will eat up the storage space. This was designed in and by and for Africa. What will people do when they have smartphones? Well, the X Prize just recently is in the midst of a global learning X Prize, and the X Prize is $15 million to anyone who can take an illiterate group of children and have them be literate without human intervention within a year. And trials for this are going on right now in Tanzania, and they're proving very successful. And that's all driven by artificial intelligence. Perhaps one of our biggest global grand challenges is climate change. We're breaking records there, unfortunately, not the kind of records that we want. 2016 was the hottest year on record, and 2015 was the hottest prior to that. This book was just launched a couple months ago by Paul Hawken and colleagues called Drawdown. They're not just trying to slow down the rate of carbon dioxide emissions. They're identifying the solutions to withdraw, to bring down our carbon dioxide levels. And this book is a fantastic resource of the 100 most effective ways to draw down carbon dioxide. One of them, of course, would be reducing our meat consumption. I'm going to focus in on this one a little bit because this is really interesting in terms of how technology, I think, will actually change our cultural relationship with, in this case, meat. I'm sure you all like meat. I know I like South African braais very much, but I also know that meat is incredibly disruptive to our environment. It's incredibly inefficient. This graph here shows beef as compared to other meat products with regards to greenhouse gases, water, feed grain, and land. It's far more damaging to our environment, resource intensive to our environment than other meat products. Whenever you see massive inefficiencies like this, solutions are going to be developed. In this case, the person holding this hamburger is Mark Post from Maastricht University. And at the time he was holding this hamburger, well, first of all, I should say this hamburger was made through cultured meat or in vitro meat, taking the live cells of an animal and growing them in a sterile petri dish, in a sterile laboratory, without killing the animal. At the time that he made this hamburger about 6 months ago, it was called a $300,000 hamburger. Well, how much does that cost him now to make? Around $10. And it won't stop there. So what happens when you go to your supermarket, maybe 10 years from now, navigating some regulatory boundaries, navigating some cultural barriers, and you see on the supermarket shelf one meat product which killed an animal, was incredibly environmentally destructive, and it is expensive, and another meat product, which is meat, didn't kill an animal, wasn't environmentally destructive, only had a fraction of the energy, land, water requirements, and is cheaper and is more nutritious, but it was grown in a laboratory. Raise your hand if you would eat the in vitro meat. They'll get there with the taste. Although Mark Post will readily admit that they're not quite there yet, but they're going to get there. Raise your hand if you would eat the in vitro meat. Raise your hand if you would not. Interesting. More of you would than not. That surprises me. You're more progressive than a lot of audiences that I speak to. Usually the majority of people won't because of this, what Mark Post calls the yuck factor. This idea of, would you really eat something that wasn't grown in a natural way? Well, for me, this is an example of how exponential technology will change our cultural relationship with, in this case, meat. Water is another area which, if you think about water, it is indeed a scarce resource on planet Earth, but looked at from another perspective, we live on a blue planet. If you look at these charts, we're only accessing a tiny, tiny percentage of the water on planet Earth for our needs. Surely the majority of the water is locked up in our oceans, which is locked up in saline water. And sure enough, following a downward exponential trend, the energy required to desalinate water is dropping significantly. And that's being driven by materials science, because we're now able to increasingly able to manipulate matter at the atomic level, molecular and atomic level. This substance here is called graphene oxide. It was just developed in early 2017, and it's a material that's specifically designed to allow water molecules through with the least amount of friction while keeping other things out. It will be a breakthrough in desalinating our oceans. And we not only have water locked up in oceans, but in our atmosphere. All around us, there's water. This is a material called a MOF, a molecular organic framework that was just developed at MIT 2 months ago. This material can absorb water in areas of 20% humidity. So think about a dry desert-type area. They can still absorb enough water to meet household needs. Talk about disruptive innovation. This would mean bypassing complicated water infrastructure pipes, and other challenges to getting water to remote areas, if you could just install this as part of your household unit and absorb water locally, it could be a complete game changer. And in fact, we're living in an era of exponential opportunity. For one, all of our industries are being disrupted. Every single one of our service industries, our resource industries around the global grand challenges are being disrupted. They're changing, which means there's incredible opportunity for any innovator. As well, there's an influx of financial resources flowing into solving the world's biggest challenges. Here's a graph that shows even experts, in fact, be careful of that word experts. This is the International Atomic Energy Agency's predictions of the amount of gigawatts of photovoltaic added to the grid on a yearly basis. All of these lines were their predictions, when actually the black line is what really happened. And you would think year after year after year they would get it right. They don't get it right, because even the experts can't appreciate exponentially growing technology. Rapidly changing transformations that are unbelievable even to the people who are thinking about it. This means opportunity for any innovator who's ready to position herself as to where trends are going to go and design for that. It's also an area of exponential opportunity because of the financial resources that are moving into solving the world's biggest challenges. It is estimated that to meet our sustainable development goals, it will require an investment of $90 to $120 trillion between now and 2030, the year 2030. Roughly $100 trillion are going to move to solving the world's biggest challenges. This is a fantastic website and reference. I recommend it. This is from the UN Global Compact. They break down the opportunity areas for each one of our Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, they come up with numbers like this. Just housing alone is a $300 billion market. Smart water tech, a $1 trillion market, waiting for innovators, waiting for entrepreneurs. And new sources of funding as well. Crowdfunding just came alive within the last 10 years or so. You have many crowdfunding sites here in South Africa. In fact, this one that's Thundafund, that is advertising coffee books for dogs, probably not the biggest global grand challenge, but I'm sure other major challenges are being funded on Thundafund. I also understand that Thundafund is, within the next few months, going to be crowdfunding for equity-based crowdfunding, breaking new frontiers on crowdfunding. In fact, impact investing is a booming area in the banking and venture capitalist industry. There's already about $115, $120 billion annually moving for impact investing. And this graph here shows, amongst a select group of investors, the increase that they're going to do from 2016 to 2017. And then there's another interesting phenomenon that we don't even really know what's going on here yet. Cryptocurrencies and blockchain, where there's a concept of an ICO, an initial coin offering. Just last month, more money was raised through ICOs than all venture-backed money for internet-based startups. More money was raised from ICOs for startup funding, meaning some people got together, created a crypto coin, put it out there in the market, and people invested in that, knowing that they were going to get a share of that coin while they could start their startup. This is such a new phenomenon, we don't even know what's going on here. In the United States, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, just put an announcement out to everyone working on the ICO world. Be aware, we are going to look at you from a financial regulatory perspective. But it's happening so fast, they can't even keep up. For large corporations, there's a major shift that really should happen in our mindset. And that shift is moving from an era of corporate social responsibility and triple bottom line thinking, which have served us fairly well up until now. But that's not good enough to solve the world's biggest challenges. Our corporations, our business leaders, and our business titans need to see the global grand challenges as the world's biggest opportunities, and also the world's biggest threats if they're not solved. Indeed, the father of triple bottom line thinking, John Elkington, was at Singularity University last year, and he said that whole corporate social responsibility era is going to end. Rather, businesses need to integrate into their core business models solving the world's biggest challenges, and we need to move into an era of exponential opportunity. And yet, I can see in the future, 10, 20, 30 years from now, where all of our global grand challenges are solved, largely driven by exponential technology and innovators around the world. But there's a paradox here. Getting from here to there, so says Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, will be filled with pain. He says more pain than pleasure. Because our social systems are going to be changing rapidly. And in fact, also because the very technologies that are being developed, be it artificial intelligence, CRISPR, and others, also make us more vulnerable as well. Another tip of the hat to Elon Musk. We adore him in Silicon Valley. Thank you very much for that. He's also provoking in terms of reminding us he has a big concern about artificial intelligence. He uses the phrase that artificial intelligence poses an existential risk to humanity. So in fact, the very technologies we're creating make us vulnerable. And the very rapid pace of change leads to societal disruption that, if we're not careful, could make things very unstable. And in fact, there's this concept of technological unemployment. And it's estimated that roughly in the next 20 years, 50% of all job titles that exist now will not exist. Human jobs that we're used to doing right now, think taxi drivers, accountants, many lawyers, et cetera, white-collar jobs, blue-collar jobs, will be outdone by artificial intelligence and robotics, which poses huge questions. What will happen? Will new jobs be created? And humans will retool for those new jobs, which many people, including Ray Kurzweil, says will happen. Will those jobs not be replaced with new jobs? In which case, we might live in an era of technological unemployment and serious social disruption. This is a video that illustrates the notion of fairness. There's a researcher named Alex Duvall who's trained these monkeys that when they give the researcher a rock, the researcher gives the monkey back a cucumber. However, this time they did things a little bit differently.
Getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
Yeah, really, are we that much different from monkeys in terms of our sense of fairness? And yet we know that technology, exponential technology, has the effect of amplifying differences. Unless we design inclusion into our paradigms for innovation, unless we design for abundance for all, we risk serious disruption for humanity. So we have our technologies, which can serve us for very good means. They can also make us more vulnerable. The pace of change poses real challenges for humanity. And it raises real questions. Really, are we on track towards reaching abundance? Or is this an elusive dream? As a guide towards thinking that, yes, we can create abundance, yes, we can navigate these potential pitfalls, there's this notion that humanity follows a moral arc towards good. And yet you got to say, is that really enough? What's the driver of that moral arc? And just last week, we were reminded of that in the United States. We had a flare-up of some hate and some racism in the United States. And our ex-president, Barack Obama, came out and he made a tweet. And he made a tweet that has turned into the most liked tweet ever. And it was a reminder that we humans like the positive, we don't like the negative. And this is his tweet. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Thank you again, Nelson Mandela. A reminder, yes. This is the driver, because it is easier to love than it is to hate. There is a moral arc towards goodness. And Africa is poised to pounce. I think you're going to hear this theme over and over again. But as I mentioned, I've been living on this continent for 30 years. I still live in Kenya and Zanzibar. And I've been looking at observing development issues in Africa from many different perspectives. And now I think about the next 30 years. Africa is poised to pounce globally. This report just came out a couple months ago. This is the World Population Prospects. And what do you notice on this curve here? This is population in Africa as compared to all other continents. Just Africa right now is at a takeoff point. This is population. No other continents other than Asia are increasing, and in Asia it is starting to decrease. Within the next 50 years, of the top 10 largest growth countries in the world, 6 of them are in Africa. So you might say, okay, that means a lot more people. Well, in my mindset, because this is already programmed in, this is programmed into demographics. In my mind, because of this notion of the democratization of technology, because each and every single one of us on this planet as humans have equal potential for creativity and for innovation, this means this many more billions of people in Africa who will be contributing, not receiving technology, but developing technology to solve the world's challenges. This report also just came out recently. This is the Global Innovation Index, and it ranks all the countries in the world according to this methodology, which takes into a lot of considerations about which countries are most innovative. So I've got some good news and some bad news for you here in South Africa. You want the good news first or the bad news? Good news is you're number 1 in Africa. So congratulations for that. Of all the countries in Africa, South Africa is the number 1 for innovation. Congratulations. The bad news is that's not good enough. South Africa ranks 57th out of 127 countries in the world. This is not the position that we want to see Africa, and this is not the position we want to see South Africa. But I can tell you one thing for sure. If you are an innovator, if you are an investor, a businessman, a business person, an entrepreneur, a government official, a social activist who is concerned about and wants to solve the world's biggest challenges, you can be in no better place. Right here, right now, ready to solve the world's biggest challenges. Thank you.
Hey there, how's it going?
Solve the world's biggest challenges. Thank you.
Hey there, how's it going? Thank you for your optimism.
Absolutely.
Thank you, that was awesome. So we want to remind everybody that if you've got questions, please tweet your questions. We'd love to get them. So, I mean, I want to ask you, we hear people like Elon Musk who are worried about AI. They think the Terminator scenario is more realistic than not. What do you say to that? Because people like Ray Kurzweil says artificial intelligence, biological intelligence, all of it is intelligence. There's a couple cognitive philosophers who say something like the human mind, or the mind as it exists today, exists in the feedback loops of brains, environments, and tools. So that we're just really distributed cognitive machines, part biological, part not. Where do you stand on that AI debate?
Well, I think AI is qualitatively different from our organic way of thinking right now. And the difference, particularly if we get to general artificial intelligence, it would be distinct from human control. And I think that's the fear and concern of people like Elon Musk, and not just him, Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, and others. Where Ray Kurzweil comes from is this notion that we will integrate with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence will be a tool for us to make the human condition better, less suffering, and more fulfilling.
I agree with you. So how does an organization like Singularity University measure impact? This is a question that's just come in.
Okay, so we take impact very seriously at Singularity University because our overall mission, as you were told early on, is to educate, empower, and inspire leaders like yourself to leverage exponential technology to solve the world's biggest problems. We measure impact by looking at 6 different outcomes that any one of the people who go through our programs, including you, can go and do after the program. And then we send out surveys to find out if people did any one of those 6 things. And those 6 things are things like start a new company, innovate within your organization, get involved in policy, education and awareness, research and development. These are the things that you can do to go out there and address the world's biggest challenges. So we send out surveys, we find out what percentage of people are actually doing those. And by virtue of being in this summit, you're now part of the SU community. We're very delighted to have you in our community. And we're going to, here in South Africa and around the world, we create enabling resources and communities of people to help you on your impact journey.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.